Is today's security good enough for tomorrow?
Clearly, no.
Super aggregator is the blood flowing to our veins.
Perhaps the set-top box is dead, but to be replaced by streamers.
Legacy always lasts longer than you think it will.
Drive customer experiences and create new opportunities for carriers to engage with their customers.
Open and free does not mean easy.
The network is like a living organism.
If I give you $100 million, what would you do with it?
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our session here today. This is part of the Connecting the Dots super track, where we have, as you saw in the video, thought leaders, innovators, and game changers of our industry share their tips, insights, and learnings. My name is Andy Waltenspiel, and I'm running a Munich, Germany-based consultancy working with some of the tier 1 telco and service providers in Europe and some of the leading vendors. Very excited to be here in Philadelphia with you today for a session on key innovations and trends in video delivery, encoding, and more. Presented by Emmy Award winners. You have seen some of the Emmys here in the video. So there was Michel Artier, CEO of ATEM. They won a few of those nice Emmys. And Sasan will maybe tell us about what did they win them for. So yeah, let me call on stage my two great panelists, Sasan Bejan from ATEM, big applause please. And Erdogan Simsek from Charter. Before we jump in, great to have you, excited to be with you here on stage. Let's do a quick round of introductions. Tell us about yourself and your company. Erdogan, you go first.
I work for Charter Communications in US, and we operate cable network with DOCSIS, traditional QAM video, and also OTT service. And I'm in charge of the IP video infrastructure from content acquisition, encoding, packaging, cloud DVR, and CDN.
Okay, thank you. And Sasan.
Good morning, Andy, and good morning to our audience. So I work for ATEM. I'm part of the CTO's office, in charge of emerging technologies. ATEM, for those of you who may not know, until a few years ago, primarily an encoder-based company, hardware, software, live bot encoders. But since a few years ago, and especially since the acquisition of a new company, we've broadened our product range. We now have packagers, origin servers, cloud-based components, CDNs, and whatnot. So kind of presenting a more general solution for our customers and a more holistic solution.
Exactly. The company you acquired was Anivia.
It was Anivia, yes.
Perfect. And since then, you also changed the logo to kit some of the colors of them into yours, I realized.
That's right. The two E's in the logo, one's blue, one's green. Green tradition was the ATEM color, blue was the Anivia color, so that was the kind of the merger of the two.
There we go. So yeah, Emmy Awards. I mean, that's a cool thing, right? So I was able to hold one at NAB. So I have a picture of Remy, your chief marketing officer, holding one, and me, quite heavy. So what did you win those for?
So there was actually 3 of them that we won. The first was for what we call our human psychovisual quality index, which is a lofty word, but what it really means is how do you what's the right metric to be able to quantify the artifacts that you see with compression? I mean, it's been the holy grail of the video coding community. Mm-hmm. The PSNR used for decades, but we all know it's not really aligned with the human visual system. Structural similarities, other metrics that have been used, and we came up with our own, which really is based on tens of thousands of assets that we use on a huge database of audiences to come up with one that really mimics the human visual system so that we can tune our video encoders to match that system. So that was one. Mm-hmm. The other one was for a massive parallel processing. So imagine you have to encode thousands of assets within 1 week, which happens actually quite often because the lawyers, they negotiate these contracts for months, and then they give the engineers 1 week to do everything and encode everything.
Nice.
And if it's always our fault if we're late, right? So we can enable, we have elastic encoders which can take those assets, split them up into the cloud into multiple little segments, have them parallel processed, and you stitch them back, you have one large asset. So a 2-hour movie can be chopped up into smaller segments, parallel processed, stitched back together. So this way you can do things faster than real time for encoding. So that was the second of those 3 Emmys. And the third one, let's see, the third one.
You'll have to look it up.
I have to look it up. I'll come back.
Okay, anyway, that's not the topic of our talk. But also, quality is an important thing, and I mean, winning these awards is of course great. So we have Emmy Awards winner and one of the leading operators on the planet here to talk about what are the key innovation and trends. And maybe Erdogan, I want to start with you. How important is video quality? And what are the challenges to get to the level that you want?
I would say video quality is always number one. But as an operator, we have to bring that video to the consumers. And, you know, there's a trade-off video quality, the bitrate that we can encode it to, and what the customer said at home can view it. So our challenge is, as an operator, as operating a huge network in US, we're trying to make sure that we can achieve the optimum quality at the transmittable bit rates that is equivalent or better than the human visual system, so that we can achieve something that makes sense. You can go as high as possible on the quality, but that doesn't mean that it is consumable. You cannot transmit it. And you know, the cost of encoding, the cost of transmission is more than what we can budget for. So yeah, these are the major things. And also, if you want to encode in higher quality, then you introduce more latency. So latency is always bad. So I would say quality is number one always, and then comes latency, buffering. So we have to solve all the problems together.
Okay. What are some of the new stuff you've seen or play with as much as you can share? Are the new codecs, enhancements, or even post-HEVC codecs? So what are the tools you use to address that problem of I don't want to transmit raw files, of course?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been looking at new codecs, and there are a lot of codecs right now out there. AVC is now too old. HEVC is also old enough. And there are new codecs. We see VVC as standing out, providing the best efficiency based on our internal tests. But in order to cover all the clients in the market and also provide meaningful investment on our encoding backend, we have to make a decision on which codecs to go with. So today, AVC covers 100% of all OTT ecosystem, but it is high bit rate. You cannot do HDR with AVC, and 4K with AVC is very prohibitable. If we add another codec, what would that be? That's the study that we did. And we looked at HEVC, we looked at AV1, VP9, and then VVC, EVC, LCVC, all of that. So our finding is that if we were to add one more codec to have the best coverage in the client side, it is HEVC today. It is very mature, and it is supported by most of the devices in the market.
Yep.
Chrome still doesn't support it. I've seen some blog posts saying that it might be now. I have to see it with my own eyes. But I don't know how the breakdown, changes from operator to operator, but in our ecosystem, browser usage is low. So Chrome, in that sense, is not an important factor in our decision making.
Yep.
So adding HEVC, we end up covering most of the ecosystem, close to maybe 80 to 90%. And for the remaining 10 to 15%, we can still use AVC for now. AV1 on the other side, there's a big gap on the Apple domain. AV1 is still not supported there. And even for Android, it is software decoders. And the hardware decoders are, every year we hear that they're coming, but still based on software decoding. Netflix today is using AV1, but there is no HDR with AV1 today. Yeah. So for that reason, from an operator point of view, trying to offer the best experience to the customer, we think AVC plus HEVC is for today. And for tomorrow, VVC seems to be a good choice if the complexity in compression is solved, and also if we start getting devices and SoCs that support native VVC decoding.
Okay, thank you for that view from Charter. Sasan, your company works with some of the leading pay TV and telco video providers on the planet. What do you see? Is it in line with what we hear from Erdogan?
It is in line, but we also, we're a global company, like you said, and we have a wide range of customers. They can be established MVPDs, they could be new media companies with no legacy issues, and from each region has its own requirements as well. So we kind of have to cater for a broad spectrum of customers. So there are customers who want the leading edge, the bleeding edge. We have to be engaged with the latest codecs, AV1, VVC, and so forth. But of course, we still have to continue improving on our legacy codecs all the way back to MPEG-2, because our customers are saying, with new hardware, with Moore's Law, we want to squeeze more out of our existing MPEG-2 or AVC services. There's still MPEG-2 SD channels, thousands of them all around the world. So we kind of have to maintain a balance here between improving the legacy codecs, but also keeping our toes into the latest and greatest codecs.
Okay. Do we ever get to a point of saturation? That's a question I asked to Michel Latier, your CEO, in a recent interview that you can find on LinkedIn. But I want to hear from you. Do you think we'll ever reach a point of, okay, this is the perfect codec, there is no more to do? What do you believe?
Well, that's an interesting question, because there's certain detail that human eye can process. That's one limitation. So going beyond that, from a customer, but offering a better quality to the customer, we might hit a limitation there. And also on the TVs now, today we have 4K TVs and we see 8K TVs today. Is it gonna get to 16K, 32K? What is the benefit to the final consumer at home? Do they have a wall that is large enough to have that huge? Because if you don't have a large display, then you don't get to see the added detail. So
yeah, it's funny. Yesterday over dinner we had exactly that discussion, and there are the charts with the optimal viewing distance and resolution. So the problem is not technology. The problem is your partner that might not allow you to redecorate your living room.
Exactly. So on the other side, the higher compression to achieve lower bit rates for many reasons, it is valuable. Reduce the traffic on the backbone, reduce the amount of storage on your cloud DVR, on your CDN caches. It is valuable. But on the other hand, if you look at the bit rates today that we achieve with HEVC on a typical streaming platform, you get below 3 Mbps, and these are for 720p, 60 frame per second streams. If you look at the lower resolution streams, we're talking about 1 megabit, 1.5 megabit per second. If you shave 40% of that, that's not in megabit yet. It's still in some 100 kilobits. So what is the value of shaving that 100 kilobits from that stream for that lower bit rates? Everybody's LTE connection can handle that very well. The broadband speeds at home are fast enough to sustain that already. So, but the amount of investment from an operator side is actually huge to include this new codec into the ecosystem. We already have our, say, AVC and then maybe HEVC, and when VVC comes, what are we going to do? Replace all of it or just add another farm? So it comes to where do we really need this additional compression? And the answer is higher resolutions. So 8K definitely needs a higher efficiency encoding. Today, HEVC with 8K, you get, around, and I owe this number to my colleague over there, 80 megabits per second. And it is, even though it is doable from a broadband speed point of view, from an operator point of view, the CDN egress amount of data, it's not manageable. So we cannot really do that. And for VVC type codecs, we apply to higher resolutions. Where do we consume that? We consume it on the TVs. We don't consume it on the mobile devices. So I think as HDR becomes more common and the content, if 8K content becomes at consumer level, then these codecs will be valuable for that. And as a limit, from a consumer point of view, I think we are getting very close to that. But from a production plant, the mezzanine format file and contribution formats, in that sense, there's some more room to go.
Okay. Interesting point about 8K. I mean, I remember HD, I think, took 15 years to have a decent market penetration. 4K, we're still at the start, and we're already talking about 8K. So a quick audience poll. Who has a 4K TV at home? Raise your hand. Anybody with an 8K? Anybody higher than 8K? Samsung the wall? Okay, so interesting, the devices are out there. Where's the content? I mean, it's nice to have an 8K device at home, but yeah, and I get some Blu-rays or some showcase content, but is the content coming? And if yes, when?
I can take the first answer. So let's look at first 4K in order to come up with some opinion on 8K.
Okay.
So today 4K on the VOD part is very common, and you find 4K content everywhere. If you go to linear, you see that 4K hasn't made the jump that we saw from SD to HD. And even though today we see events based on 4K, sports, Champions League, World Cup, it's not all the cameras. Some cameras are 4K, some cameras are HD. So in that sense, I think on the linear world, 4K doesn't have what it actually deserves, a full 4K experience. On the VOD side, though, I think it's very well adopted. All the platforms offer 4K content. So looking at 8K from the same perspective, I would say we will probably start seeing some 8K VOD content, but on the linear, it will linger for a very long time.
Okay.
Yeah, what I would add to that, yeah, I mean, as you said earlier, screen sizes have to be really, really large for you to appreciate 8K, right? I think 4K already at 55-inch between 4K and up-res HD, it's hard to see the difference, let alone 8K. What I do see happening with 8K is there's some niche areas. For example, if you're producing an 8K hockey game, but you're only showing a 4K portion of it, for example, for zooming or for replays to see the hockey puck. The other application I can see is if you want to show multiple matches simultaneously. You have 4 tennis matches, and people want to, or 4 soccer matches during the World Cup or something, or during the Olympics. Or also volumetric video, kind of going beyond the 360. Those are maybe not exactly 8K resolutions, but higher than 4K resolutions. But it's niche. I mean, I think I have a hard time seeing the mass adoption of 8K content at home because it's not worth, you're not going to see the difference on most TVs.
Yep. Okay. What about, I need 8K if I want to see metaverse, VR, AR. Is that where it will come first?
So when I was alluding to volumetric video, that's kind of one application of that. The problem there is, of course, you also have to have very, very low latency because you moved your head, you want the scene to change, right? So
Yeah. Okay. Do you have a bet? When will we see starting, at least early, we have early adopters already. So when do you see mass market for 8K? How far is that away? 5? 10? How many years?
For content or for the
Content.
ecosystem? I would say we will see content from providers like NHK, which they are at the forefront. But from a consumer point of view, I think, well, it actually goes also hand in hand with, say, the device market. So we will probably see 8K TVs with VVC type compression starting next year. The days that we heard from SoC vendors and TV providers, it was 2022, but it didn't happen. So hopefully it is 2023. And then as the VVC hardware decoder gets into the SoCs, we see, say, Apple TVs, Roku's supporting 8K. It's a chicken and egg situation. Content provider says, where is the device? Device provider says, where is the content?
Yes.
So in this case, I think the device ecosystem will be quicker and then maybe encourage the content side to start producing maybe 1 or 2 events a year for advertising.
The big sporting events. Yeah. Okay. Let's talk a bit about the back end of things. On-prem, in the cloud, both a mix or one or the other. What setup do you have, and which setups do you see in your customers? Erdogan, I'll let you go first.
Okay, I will divide that into 2 categories. One category is, say, a provider with no infrastructure, no data center. So they have content and they're looking for a solution. I think for them, cloud is best. You don't have to worry about anything. Just go. It is all connected to the CDN, so you spin up your channel in minutes. But if we look at the operator world with hundreds and thousands of channels, linear channels, that you have to dedicate a 724 encoding process, the number climbs up really fast in the public cloud. So, and especially if you have your own network, you have your data centers around the country, it makes sense to have the data plane at least on-prem, all the encoding and packaging, your cloud DVR. Even if you put your cloud DVR in the public cloud, the egress charges, the amount of storage, the cost is very prohibitive. So I think from an operator point of view, on-prem for data plane and public cloud for control plane makes a really good combination and good resiliency. But as I said, for smaller content providers, it makes sense to just spin up everything in the public cloud.
Okay, great. Sasan, what do you see in your customer?
Yeah, so we have actually a few interesting cases. So in general, the trend is a lot of people want to move to the cloud for multiple reasons. Could be disaster recovery, could be faster spin up of channels. But we have one interesting case that's kind of a counter trend. We have a company which started a virtual MVPD, which started out in the cloud. They had no legacy, no infrastructure, and they got to a point where they were doing hundreds of channels in the cloud. And recently, like 6 months ago, they came to us and say, we want to go on-prem.
Full?
Or
a mix?
Or actually a mix. But they want to go on-prem, and we said, okay, is it cost? They said costs is part of it, for sure, but not the only part of it. It's also having more control because we want to go lower latency, and we want to control all the components. So we've seen that counterexample not from a traditional company who had the infrastructure, but somebody who started out in the cloud. So that was interesting. The other distinction I would make is between VOD and live. VOD seems to be a lot more amenable to doing things in the cloud because of its bursty nature. The example I gave earlier, you suddenly have to encode thousands of assets in a week. You don't want to build an infrastructure for that. The cloud is really good.
Yep.
But if you have a 24/7 linear channel and you know it's constant, it's going to be there day in, day out, sometimes the economics work out better if you're doing things on-prem. And then we also have the case of multi-cloud customers. Some of the biggest customers we have, they have their own on-prem private cloud, but they also don't want to have a single public cloud provider because they have leverage to negotiate better deals. So we end up having to design our products such that they can be instantiated on-prem or in any of the three big major clouds seamlessly so they can control everything in a seamless fashion. So that's also another trend we've seen.
Okay, cool. So the customer experience is great video, great quality, fantastic. What about audio? I mean, video without audio is boring. What are the next big things there? Is there next-gen audio? Is it coming? Who is it for? When does it come?
From an operator point of view, again, right now the challenges are in the device space. And if you use codecs like AAC, HEAAC, AC3, EAC3, AC4, but when you look at the client space, you see that there's a huge fragmentation about which supports what. So right now, I think especially with Dolby Atmos type object-based sound technologies are using EAC3. I think EAC3 from a commercial point of view makes sense. And AC4 is something that we're also looking into as the next codec for us. And for that, a couple things. One is, again, the CP device space and also content. As us, we don't really create the content. We just take the content from the content providers. So as soon as they introduce the new codec, we will be ready to offer it to the customers.
Yeah, as we heard even in the video, legacy lives longer than you think, right?
Right.
It's again what is out in the market, and you might do cool stuff, but it can only be done with new devices. Yes. Talking about devices, which devices are the most prominent you see? Do you see soundbars coming? Some operators start doing it. I saw Technicolor Vantiva win an award for that at IBC. So, or is it set-top boxes with integrated speakers? What works?
So, soundbars certainly work better. I mean, okay, if you want to have immersive audio, it's not practical to have 11 speakers, in your living room. And even if you could have it in your living room, you can't take it away to your bedroom or, on the road with you. So soundbars are more practical, but we've also seen headsets, really sophisticated headsets, which can do a pretty good job of replicating that immersive experience. And that's really useful because now you can, use it with your iPhones or your smartphones, tablets, whatnot, and take it on the road with you. So those, I think, are very promising and very interesting, the headsets that are out there with.
Okay. Great. So I want to leave a few minutes also for audience questions. Think about if you have some. I'll open the microphone in a second. But before that, I have a question for Erdogan. You've seen it as a teaser in the video. What if I gave you $100 million? What would you do with it? For charter, sorry. No bikes and boats.
I think my answer will apply to many in our industry. The biggest problem is the client device space. When we want to introduce a new codec, we see that looking at our own internal analytics, we see that, okay, there are a lot of devices that don't support it. So going into multi-codec, and multi-codec helps. The advanced codec helps in the last mile, but not in our backbone and storage systems. So I would use that money to offer dongle to those customers who don't have the new devices.
Okay. And what would Atem do?
So, I mean, $100 million is a sizable chunk of change for us. That's our annual revenue. So.
Good.
But, I mean, for me, I would accelerate our roadmap. There's so many features, so many things that we want to do and are just pushed too far out due to lack of resources. And if we could have more resources and, if need be, make an acquisition or so, like we did with Anivia, to accelerate that roadmap. So for example, 2 weeks ago at IBC, we introduced our new 10 Plus service, which is a encoding in the cloud pay-as-you-go service. But it's just purely encoding, and we can't, it will take us time to add all the other components, the packaging, origin, server, and so forth. With more money, we could accelerate that roadmap, for example, just to give you one example. Ad insertion is something we're working on to help our clients monetize their assets. Again, the roadmap is a blocker due to lack of resources. So I would spend that money on acquiring new resources or expanding organically or acquisitions.
Okay, so legacy always lives longer. Let's talk about the set-top box. I mean, that's the video reception device in many of the tier 1 operators in Europe, in the US, in Latin America. Quick audience poll. Who thinks the set-top box is dead? Okay, 1. Who thinks the set-top box will live for the next 10 years? Okay, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, and it depends on the geography. But yeah, so you will have to deal with certain of the legacy on the audio side, on the video side, on the codec support side for quite a while. That is a challenge, and you will probably, the strategy will, unless you get somebody to give you $100 million, it will be a cap and growth strategy most of the time. So, any audience questions here? Don't be shy. We have a microphone here. Just walk up. And, okay, the 2 gentlemen. One is already on his feet. Please say your name and your company. It should work.
Steve Wilson, Comcast. This isn't your guys' area expertise, and it's similar to the question you just asked Andy. Do you guys think, so with respect to set-top boxes being alive or dead, what do you guys think about linear channels versus VOD? Is linear channel going to live? Or is linear channel dead?
Okay, thank you.
So a couple of years ago, I actually posted an article on LinkedIn saying, should linear channels still be a thing? And I got some interesting responses to that. And then soon after, we saw the growth of the fast business model. And I kind of said, okay, maybe it still is a thing. I personally thought, apart from sports, there's no reason to have live linear channels, but I was proven wrong on that. Also, I see interactive programs, these reality shows where the audience is polled and you have to interact. Those also seem to be well suited for a linear model. So I think the linear model will still be with us for a while. Longer than that, at least I thought. I was wrong about it 2 years ago.
So I agree. Some years ago, this question was an important question being asked, and everybody thought, oh, linear is dead. And in Comcast, probably you see the same behavior, looking at your CDN traffic every day for VOD and for linear. VOD is just a change in the pocket compared to linear traffic. So it is definitely not getting lower, but which channels are getting this line share from that streaming? I think that is the question. So maybe some channels, some type of content might disappear from linear world, but linear is not going to die anytime soon.
No, the question has 2 components. One is it the way I distribute, or is it how the consumer behaves? And I think the lean back experience is something we still see in many of the customers around the planet. Also, the younger generation is used to do it on the move, on the phone, and that's probably more on demand. But I think there is and will be a need for some lean back experiences where I just sit down and even just zap and relax. So,
for our generation.
For our generation. For the generation in the room. You had also a question. Does it answer your question?
No. Yes. Thank you.
Yes? Good.
Hi, Bob Dandry, also from Comcast. Maybe for Erdogan is best. Do you have ideas for use cases for LC EVC?
Well, we are testing it, and we are trying to, and there's a certain advantage with LC EVC. It uses base codec, and then it builds this additional resolution. And it seems, and we have not finished our own internal validation on it yet, but it is something that we're looking into because of the efficiency that it gives and also the support that it provides because of an underlying codec. It definitely sounds interesting, but we don't have a strong opinion yet.
Question back, do you have use cases?
In the same state.
Okay.
Maybe I'll just add one point. So in Brazil with the TV 3.0, their LCEVC has been squeezed into that standard, so we've had to at least look into it for that market.
Okay, it's going on in Brazil. More questions? Anyone? Lyle?
Sorry, I've missed a good portion of this, so I don't really have many questions.
Okay. Sorry for putting you on the spot. If not, if we don't have any more questions, then I would say big applause for the two gentlemen here. Thanks for being with us. It was great to have you. Thank you, Erdogan. Thank you, Sasan. Thanks you for coming. And we have one more session that's going to start in 10 minutes, and we're going to talk about 50 Shades of Latency with Cinemedia and with Lyle here in 10 minutes. It would be great to have you. Otherwise, have a great day and a safe trip home. Bye. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.